Hello and welcome to ID Boxing for a very special preview of Chris Billam-Smith versus Isaac Chamberlain this weekend in Bournemouth for the European and Commonwealth Cruiserweight titles, joined by Mr. Andy Clarke, the man himself. Andy, nice to see you as always. How you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Very well. I won't actually see that fight live myself. I'm in Newcastle for the Channel 5 show, but looking forward to that. Josh Kelly's on it. Saw him in the gym a few days ago. Harlem Eubank as well. Pat McCormack. Yeah, it's a good weekend coming up, actually.
It is a good weekend coming up, and this is obviously primarily going to be focused on the Bournemouth show because that's where I'm going to be. But let's talk about that Wasserman show before we kind of move on to there. You mentioned Josh Kelly there. For myself, very much looking forward to seeing Pat McCormack. As you all know, a very decorated, established amateur. Had a bit of a stop-start journey so far as a pro or into the pro ranks, but it'll be good to see him get out on Saturday night. Saturday night.
Yeah, Saturday. So I saw Ben Davison and Pat on Saturday just gone because I was presenting the TalkSport Saturday night show, and they came in for the final hour with me and Gareth, and Ben's very heavily sold on Pat, which doesn't come as any great surprise because Olympic silver medalist, World Championship silver medalist, golds in the Euros, Commonwealth Games. He was very consistent over that last Olympic cycle. And their feeling is that they just need to get him round somehow, that he's already capable of winning a British title. Echo Esserman, a former GB teammate of his, is British champion, would have plenty to say about that. But they feel he can move quick, and given recent evidence with elite international amateurs, there's no reason why he can't, but matching him early is really difficult. Finding someone who can give him some rounds is a tricky thing to do.
Always the case. Certainly, I feel like over here with our standout amateurs, it's always a little bit tricky to match them in the early stages. Before we move on, you mentioned Josh Kelly, of course, kind of having his comeback-ish type situation that he's got going over at Wasserman at the minute. There's been a lot of talk about him potentially against Lewis Ritson, which is a strange one, 140-pounder, but also Troy Williamson, which I think would be a fantastic fight. We were talking about it before we got started filming here. A really good clash of styles and a fight that I know that you're very interested in potentially seeing in the future.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great fight. And it was interesting because I was due to commentate on Josh's fight at the Indigo in May when he was supposed to box Giulio Vernozzi, who just pulled out late on, decided he didn't want to do it, basically. And they tried everything they could to entice him into the ring, but he just wasn't having it because of the weight difference between the two, which, as far as Wasserman were concerned, just wasn't an issue, that he knew that was likely what was going to happen. But he didn't fight on the night, and it was very frustrating. And at that point, I think because they wanted to cover all bases, they were talking about the likes of Ritson, and I knew that couldn't happen because he's a super lightweight and not a particularly big one. And I knew from speaking to Josh himself that it was going to be super welterweight, and from talking to Adam Booth, that's where he was going to be. So Troy Williamson makes total sense. He's British champion. The board have put them together, and he's up for it. Josh Kelly's up for it. Like I say, I saw him in the gym last week, and he said, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to. Love that fight. Love to win a British title. Great fight for the North East. They know each other, again, from the GB squad. And I think it would be an easy one for Calla and Nissa Sauerland to get the purse bid and stick it on Channel 5 because Troy Williamson is, well, he signed with Pro Bellum, and their fighters have got problems at the minute. In that, Pro Bellum aren't doing their own shows, so they need to find other shows to go on, basically.
Good fight as well. I really like the style matchup. You've got Troy Williamson, who's kind of very physically strong, physical at the weight, and Josh Kelly, who we've obviously seen come up from 147. He's got fast hands, fast feet, very flashy. I'm really interested to see what happens in the second half of that fight, if it indeed does get there. I think it's a good fight for us to see where Josh Kelly's at. But we are here to talk about this weekend's bout between Chris Billam-Smith and Isaac Chamberlain. Recently, I caught up with the defending European and Commonwealth champion Chris Billam-Smith at McGuigan's gym to discuss the fight. Isaac Chamberlain is, of course, the opponent challenging for your European and Commonwealth titles in Bournemouth. What do you make of him as an opponent? Obviously, somebody who's boxed Lawrence Okoli, gym mate of yours many years ago, kind of not went off the scene, but hasn't been as kind of prominent as he was back then. How difficult of a fight is this for yourself?
Yeah, difficult fight. Stylistically, he's got quick hands, good variety in his shots, loose, relaxed, can be elusive. So it's a very difficult fight. I think it's hard to say where he's at because we've seen 6 rounds of him in the last 3 years or whatever it is, 3.5 years. So it's hard to know where he's at. But we'll find out next Saturday where he's at, and you've got to expect the best version of him and more because he's been working. He's got a new coach. He's got some good wins. Some against lower level opposition, but he's still getting rid of them really quickly. So you can't take. He's just doing his job and getting rid of people who have put in front of him.
So that was Chris Billam-Smith, obviously in a very confident mood. I think he's very happy to be taking a show down to Bournemouth for the first time. First big show down to Bournemouth. He has, of course, boxed there in the past. Something I've spoken to him about in the past, and certainly something that I've mentioned openly, is he, I feel, is very much a success story of British boxing. I remember speaking to Jake McGuigan years ago in the gym when he was kind of sparring George Groves and David Hay and stuff, and it was like, if we can get this guy to win an area title, maybe a Commonwealth, we'll be over the moon with that. European champion has obviously had to vacate that. Commonwealth champion, and he's kind of knocking on the doors now. He's well ranked with all of the governing bodies, could be fighting for a world title sometime soon.
Yeah, he could be. I think Billam-Smith is a great example of a fighter who genuinely has taken things fight by fight and level by level, and I think that is easier to do or easier to achieve when you turn pro and maybe there aren't that many expectations on you. I always think about Josh Warrington when you're thinking about how to build a career, because when he turned pro, no one really thought he was going to do anything. When Chris turned pro, he did have a good background in the amateurs, got to some ABA finals. I don't think he won a final off the top of my head.
Lost to Vidal Riley.
Exactly. So he's got to a good level and he's convinced Shane McGuigan to train him. So obviously he's in a good place and people were hearing his name. But yeah, as you say, they're thinking, if we could get into a Commonwealth title. And what that means is that you really do take it session by session in the gym. And then you get to A level and think, great, that's brilliant. What if I could get to the next one? And then you get to the next one, you have a look around and think, yeah, this is all right. I can hold my own here. This is no big deal. I wonder if I can get to the next one. And that is how you do it. And particularly, again, the parallel with Warrington would be make that base in Portsmouth as big as you can and as much of a fortress as you can, because people look at Josh and they think that he sold thousands of tickets from day one, and he didn't. It took a long time to build that up. And it was only when he was at a certain level. He'd gone away and won an English title and away and won a Commonwealth title when at that point Sky decided, right, we'll put you on in elite. They're not the same, the two places, but he is genuinely a Bournemouth fan and you could try and do the whole football thing. But if he could get a regular crowd of 5,000 or 6,000 down there, turn out to watch him, headline shows and pack a venue out, that's great, isn't it? That's what we want. The powerhouses of London and Liverpool and Manchester, Newcastle, Sheffield, in terms of shows are fine, but I love it when you get a fighter who's from somewhere unfashionable, as they would describe it, but it's just got that really kind of tribal fan base that they know they can call upon like 2-3 times a year maybe.
Yeah, I agree. And just to echo what you said about being a Bournemouth boy and a Bournemouth football fan, he is very much a Bournemouth fan. You'll know as well as I do, it's not always the case when you see these fighters dressed in these club colours. Be interested to... That's a new feature. We could ask these fighters, name your starting 11.
That'd
be a good one. But yes, he is, of course, boxing Isaac Chamberlain. Kind of been, a bit of a forgotten man, I think, at cruiserweight. Cruiserweight's been a very good division over here recent years. You've had Whittaker, Chris Billam-Smith, of course, who they boxed each other. Tommy McCarthy's boxed both of them. Jack Massey boxed Whittaker, won an IBO title. Isaac Chamberlain, we've not seen that much of him, obviously, since the Lawrence Okoli bout. He boxed Luke Watkins after that, and we've not really seen an awful lot since.
No, we haven't. He is a really interesting one, Isaac, because I used to go and see him in the gym quite a bit down at Miguel's. I think I did one of his fights when he was 2 or 3-0, and I went down to see him and ended up going down there pretty much as regularly as I went anywhere. John Harding was there. Chris Congo was just turning over from the amateurs. Richard Riakpour was down there. And sparring day particularly was always a great day to go down because you'd see some really good action. So I got to know Isaac a bit, and he had that big year in 2018 where he had the fight with Okoli, which, as we know, didn't turn out to be a good fight, but it was a big promotion, big spotlight. Things didn't work out for him. But then he had a good performance at the back end of the year against Luke Watkins, which is his last big fight, really, with Angel Fernandez at that point. And I thought he boxed really well that night. And since then, just nothing has really happened. I remember getting sent a card by Sky in early 2019, because I used to get them early because I used to do the research and the stats. And it was Billam-Smith against Isaac Chamberlain. And so I went to the gym to see Isaac. I tried to go and see Chris, but Jake Mulgigan said to me, look, it's not been signed. We're bang up for it, but it's not been finalised. Once it has been, yeah, come down, that'd be great. I arranged to go and see Isaac through Angel, who didn't really ask why I wanted to go. He just said, yeah. And I got there and I immediately started talking to Isaac about this fight, and he had no idea what I was talking about. Had no idea. And I showed him the card and he said, wow, like that's news to me. And he wasn't happy. It didn't end up happening in the end. And I think his take on it was, okay, I'm supposed to be a matchroom fighter, which I think he still was at the time, or it might have been a fight by fight. I don't actually know. But of the two, you would have thought, or he certainly thought, that if one of them knew and the other one didn't, it would be him that knew and would maybe get to steal a march of a couple of weeks of preparation, not the other way around. So I found that quite interesting. And since then, yeah, he reappeared on Channel 5 last year with Mick Hennessy. But we just haven't seen him in a hard fight for 3.5 years, basically. But he's got some ability. But I just don't know. I just don't know. The seasoning in recent times is so heavily with Billam-Smith. Every which way you look at it, if you're going to be rational and logical, you have to pick him, don't you? Billam-Smith, you have to.
We caught up with Isaac Chamberlain a couple of weeks ago in Birmingham, of all places, to catch up with him ahead of his bout of Chris Billam-Smith. Here's what he had to say about his challenge for the European and Commonwealth titles. You're fighting Chris Billam-Smith, July the 30th in Bournemouth. A lot of people were very surprised at the announcement. Tell us a little bit about how the fight came to be made.
Got a call from Mick, my manager. We were speaking with Bobby at the time. And he said, this was probably about a month ago, Chris Billam-Smith. He said, yeah, I'm done.
It was as easy as that.
Yeah. Literally.
Now, Chris, you've obviously boxed Lawrence Okoli as a professional. You've boxed Waddy Camacho on that great night at York Hall all of those years ago. Feels like a really, really long time ago, that fight. Where would you put Chris in comparison to the fighters that you've boxed so far in your career?
Honestly, I can't really make that assumption yet until I've actually been in the ring with him. But and it's different because I'm very different from those years ago. So it's hard to really gauge that, you know.
As a fighter, looking at him from the outside, looking in, obviously you've been in the same division for a little while, kind of coming up together through the ranks. What does he do well? What do you rate about him as a fighter?
He's very tough, very durable. He has a high engine as well. So that's the thing that I'm going to have to deal with on the night. You know, he's going to want to win in Bournemouth in front of all his people, defending his belt. So I'm literally going to have to take it from him.
You mentioned that him defending the title in front of his people in Bournemouth. You're going out of London, you're going down there into the Lions den, so to speak. Any reservations about that? You excited to perform in kind of behind enemy lines, so to speak?
Yeah, of course. Of course, you have to do that as a contender. You know, you have to do that as a contender. If I want to elevate in this sport, I have to do things like this. And it's just going to be another experience for me.
So that was Isaac Chamberlain, now training with Bobby Mills. I mean, he's been with him for a couple of fights, training in Birmingham, which I always find quite strange. You mentioned earlier about Miguel's and Brixton and kind of that little hub, getting himself away from there now. I think it's fair to say that, you know, he's kind of got to the stage of his career where he wants to take things seriously. This is a very serious fight. With that being said, before we move on, I'm going to push you for a prediction. How do you see the fight going on Saturday night?
I think you have to pick Billam-Smith because of what he's done, you know, body of work and as Deck likes to say, Deck Taylor, what have you done for me lately? On all counts, it points towards him. That doesn't mean that Chamberlain can't win, but if you go with Chamberlain, you are purely going on a kind of gut feeling or instinct, and that's not how I do it. So I would pick Billam-Smith. Points. I'll say points. Chamberlain, really believes in himself. That's something I've always been kind of drawn to him for that reason, because you can tell that he's always happy to stand his ground. You look at the way he's gone about his career. He kind of put himself into, you could argue, he maybe put himself into cold storage a bit. He wouldn't be dictated to. He didn't. I remember him saying to me at one point, I won't be a stepping stone. This is where I am now. Mainly off the back of that Okoli fight, and in the back of my head I was thinking to myself, but you didn't win. But he rates himself, he rates his ability, and he definitely does have ability. But I just don't think he's been boxing regularly enough at anything like a high enough level to be able to beat Billam-Smith.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment. He's also very tough, awkward, defensively quite cute at times when he wants to be. So yeah, I think your assessment of it is bang on. But
if he boxes well, then this could be exactly what he needs, even with a defeat, because he needs to box at that higher level regularly, doesn't he? More regularly than he has been.
He certainly does. Speaking of boxing regularly, we're going to have a lot of debutants or people in the early stages of their careers. Debutant being Ben Whittaker, of course, silver medalist from Tokyo. We, Andy Purwell, caught up with Ben Whittaker in Birmingham to get his views ahead of his professional debut.
Ben talked about Saturday night, the excitement, getting him there for the first time. There's always been that pressure around you, that excitement as well. And we've spoken before, you'll be a bit like Marmite. People will either love you or hate you. But what are you hoping to show?
Yeah, I'm not really excited, to be fair, because at the end of the day, I've been doing it from when I'm so young. So to me, it's just another fight, another ring, another venue. And there's a lot of pressure on me in a way where people are anticipating what's going to happen. But to me, that's all noise, to be fair. As long as the main thing to me is impressing people like Joby, my dad, Sugar, and that's it really. As long as I impress them and do what I've got to do, I'll walk out the ring happy.
How critical of your work is Sugar?
Yeah, he's pretty critical, but the main critic is my dad, you know what I mean? I could have the best spar, not get hit, and probably get hit to the body once, and my dad goes, why did you get hit? But that's what type of person I am, and like I said, the Olympic thing when I didn't wear the medal, that just shows what type of mindset the household's got.
Not had like a formal announcement of your opponent, but Greg O'Neill is the man in the opposite corner to yourself. Have you been studying him much?
No, not really, to be fair. And like, I keep going back to GB, but sometimes you go to these tournaments, on the day you'd find out who you're fighting and you'd fight them. So whoever it is, man, the same outcome's going to happen. I'm going to win. And we'll make him have a nice week in Bournemouth. You know what I mean? We'll look after him. And then Saturday, he meets his maker, man.
Obviously, you're a good talker, Ben, and we know, as you say, you're very vocal. And with all the talk around you, there will be this expectation for you to put on a show. Is it playing on your mind at all? Have you thought about trying to make a statement to everybody out there?
Yeah, that one good thing with Sugar is like he's kind of matured me a little bit. Of course, I'm Ben Whittaker. I'm going to talk the talk. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. But he just said, listen, you don't always have to brag and boast. At the end of the day, your boxing will talk. I know your ability, and you know how good you are. So you don't need to do all that. Like, I had plans of rapping to the ring, doing all this, doing all that, but it's a debut at the end of the day. I want to do that one of the world titles, so stuff like that's just calming down. But when I'm in there, I know I'll get a bit excited. I'll be doing a bit of dancing and stuff like that, so the inner kid will come out of me in the ring, but other than that, I'm just calming it a little bit down.
So that was Ben Whittaker. I mean, somebody you've followed through the amateurs, not short of confidence, I think it's fair to say. Mr. Whittaker, I know somebody that you would have rated very highly from his amateur career. Just how good could Ben Whittaker be as a pro?
Really good, really good. He came through quite quickly. I remember hearing about him in the West Midlands. I think John Pegg was the first person who kind of mentioned him to me, or maybe Richie Woodall, and he did a lot in a short space of time because he medalled at the World Championships. He moved up from middleweight to light heavyweight, and 2019, medalled at the Worlds, which is a really hard thing to do. I think he'd done the same at the Europeans and then went to the Olympics. And he's got a great foundation for any kind of boxing because he is primarily hit and don't get hit, which is exactly what you want because you don't want to put unnecessary miles on your clock. And the question would be, is he going to be able to punch hard enough as a pro? But he's gone to the right place to learn how to do that, I think, in Sugar Hill. What weight is he going to box at? That interests me, because he was light heavy as an amateur, which is 176 or 77. Yeah. You know, it's around there. So that's the light heavyweight limit. But obviously it's different in the amateurs because you have to make it every day for 2 weeks during a tournament. So you'd imagine that he would probably come down to super middleweight. Somebody was talking to me the other day about how they'd seen his fight on Saturday described as being at middleweight. That's not impossible that you could box at 160, making the weight on a Friday lunchtime, having previously boxed as an amateur at 176. You could do that. But personally, you'd imagine that it would be lowest. It would be super middle. But he's got all the ability you could possibly want. You speak to people who are on the squad with him. I was talking to Lewis Richardson back in February, and he's the current GB middleweight. And I was asking him about the fighters who are turning over. And he just said that Whittaker's so good. He's so good. And he's got some personality and he's got plenty to say.
He certainly does, yeah. I mean, that's going to go one of two ways for you as a pro. You're going to make people like you, people dislike you, but as long as they watch you, I guess, as the old adage goes, then you're doing your job. I remember the first time, or the earliest version of Ben Whittaker that I watched him box Alexander Kizniak. And we know what Kizniak is and kind of how he approaches the fight. And I remember thinking at the time, like, he's not just flash and he's not just this. You have to, if you box Alexander Kizniak, you're going to have to show some metal in there at some point. And that is conventionally kind of the type of fighter that you'd want to see him in against, that sort of being an outward or sort of outside fighter, good on his feet. Yeah. You'd want to see what happens when somebody sticks it right on him. That's
the question. That's the question. And during the Olympics, I remember thinking that the fight he had against Katayev could have gone either way. He got the decision, and I'm not saying it was wrong, but he could easily not have got it. It was a very close fight. What I didn't know was that he had injury problems, and he was basically fighting one-handed.
He had a shoulder injury, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to make a big difference. So maybe we have, and I don't know how long that had been the case for, because it could be that he was carrying that for really quite a long time, because although with COVID that would have been... You know, you'd imagine that he wasn't carrying it for 2 or 3 years, because during COVID you would have had the opportunity to get it sorted out. But these are the kinds of things that can happen that you don't necessarily know about, that can make a big difference. But yeah, that's the question mark with him, basically, is that over the longer duration, where your legs slow down a bit, maybe in the later rounds, can he cope? And his answer would be, yes, I can.
I'm sure it would be his answer. I think he probably will fight for titles at 168 pounds. Speaking to some of
that makes sense.
258. I think he'll probably debut. It wouldn't surprise him if he's 172, 73, and then they kind of gradually bring it down as he starts fighting for titles. But that's one Midlands-based Olympian, or Olympic medalist, should I say. Now on to the other one, Frazer Clarke, of course, 1-0, makes his return to the ring. We caught up with him in Loughborough last week, and here's what he had to say ahead of his return to the ring in Bournemouth. So you make your long-awaited return to the ring. We've kind of discussed this over a plate of breakfast this morning. Stay tuned for that on ID Boxing to have a look. But yeah, we've kind of spoken about the fact that you went through an extra cycle as an amateur, or extra couple of cycles as an amateur, and the word was that you would, Frazer going to be fast-tracked, Frazer going to get on with it. Obviously, you've had a hand injury, hasn't quite worked out like that. What's your kind of thoughts of your first year as a professional so far?
It's been challenging, proper. The hand injuries wasn't ideal, but what you got to remember is this is boxing. Anything can happen. That can happen at any time. It's happened. You can either sit there and moan about it or get on with it. As far as the fast-track thing goes, I've always said, if I felt like I was old, then fast-track me. But I don't. I feel great. I feel like I've still got the best yet to come. And with my experience already, I think I'm only getting better as a boxer, as a fighter. So I don't. This fast track thing depends how fast you're talking. But you go like I said before, I don't want to walk, I don't want to sprint. We should go somewhere in between. Do you know what I mean? The right fight, so leave that to the management and the people at Sky. The right time, propel me in the right way. But I'm getting better all the time, and I know I compete at a good level, so it's all good.
So that was Frazer Clarke, Olympic bronze medalist. I kind of mentioned to him when we were doing the interview, you could see, and you would have followed his amateur career and seen the ups and downs and the highs and lows that he'd had throughout his amateur career. You could see the outpouring of relief from him. That bronze medal really meant the world to him in the Olympics. And as we know, staying up until the wee hours of the morning watching them, it was one of those real feel-good moments for him. But of course, in the past now, he's now a professional. He's a heavyweight. Of course, always with that comes great interest and intrigue. Same question for him. How good can Frazer Clarke be? How big of an impact do you see him having as a pro at heavyweight?
It's an interesting one, this. I haven't really made my mind up. He's got good tools. He's been well coached. He was on that GB squad for a really long time. So he's had a lot of boxing, a lot of fights, which in one way is good. But there is some wear and tear there. There have been some injuries. And he has just recently got over an injury. And that's why he's been out of the ring for longer than he would have wanted to, having made his debut in February. I would imagine he's going to get to European level Frazer. As for whether he makes a step up from there, we just don't really know at this point. And I think that's probably a fair thing to say about most people. It's hard to predict exactly with any certainty that somebody's going to become a world champion unless they're the likes of Lomachenko, Usyk, people like that. He needs to try and get some rounds. And matching heavyweights in the early stages is not the easiest thing to do. The opponent he had on the Carnbrook bill was nothing like good enough, but that was a debut. And I appreciate that the matchmaker's job with that one is not all that simple. Someone like, the sooner they feel that he's ready to get in with someone like Kamil Sokolovsky, the better. But you've got to be careful with that.
Yes.
Because if you're not ready for it, he'll beat you. And then you've got a problem. But that kind of fighter, there aren't that many of them around. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because we sat down with him when we was doing one of our other feature bits. Not sure if this will be out before or after, but anyway, won't spoil the surprise. And I sort of said that to him. You know, I think he knows that Jake Darnell, with all due respect to him, wasn't the type of opponent that you would want an Olympic bronze medalist.
It reminded me of Lawrence Okole's debut. Do you remember?
Yeah, Jeffrey Cave.
That's right. Yeah, they went on after the main
Jeffrey
event.
Cage.
They went on after the main event in Manchester.
That was a horrible knockout.
One night, and it was absolutely savage. Yeah.
I think that was like a 48 hours job as well. Like
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I actually mentioned Kamil Sokolovsky as the name for him, and he said, look, obviously he's had a hand injury, quite a bad hand injury by all accounts. Going to come back, try and get some rounds under his belt. He's not been as active as he would have liked to have been so far as a pro because of those things. And then he said, within 3, 4, 5 fights, that's the type of opponent that I want to test myself against and go in with. So I think I agree with you. The sooner that he's in with somebody like that, okay, Kamil Sokolovsky is not a world beater. He's not even really a world level gatekeeper, but he's a capable fighter who's been in with some very, very good fighters, and he's beaten some good fighters.
Yeah, exactly. We saw him beat George Fox at the end of last year. I think I saw 3 or 4 of his fights in a row. I saw him in against a real big old boy in Kiev on the K2 bill the week after, and I think he went the rounds.
He did, yeah.
Then I saw him against Bakadir Jalolov, and he managed to take him into the 4th, I think it was, or maybe...
He stopped him in the last round. I think he stopped him I think that might have been 8 or 6, but he stopped him in the last round.
I think he took him further than anyone else to take him.
Yeah.
But you could see that was getting hard for him. But he bit down, and his pride, dictated that he wanted to stay in there for as long as possible. But Jalolov is a serious piece of machinery.
Yeah.
He really is.
Yeah. I think he's the next one.
Yeah, I do too. I was kind of unsure about him actually at one point. I just thought maybe there's not too much more to him than a good 1-2, and it might be a little bit too basic. But since he's gone pro, he just physically looks a bit different. His legs look a bit thicker. His backside looks a bit bigger, which I think you kind of want in a heavyweight, and he can really crack.
And that's feet as well.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the Olympic cycles produce some good heavyweights. Torres for the USA with Top Rank. He's a bit small, but again he's a good fighter, and these are the kind of peers for Frazer Clarke. But Sokolovsky's that guy. You know, he's not. You know, you're not looking to fight Kamil Sokolovsky if you're Filip Hrgović, because he's past that point now.
Yeah, no, I agree. From one Olympian or another Olympian to another Olympian, Caroline Dubois also returns to the ring this weekend in Bournemouth. We were down at McGuigan's gym to see how she's developing in the early stages of her professional career.
Let's talk about your last couple of fights, your 2 fights as a professional. Tell me, if you can, the difference between the second fight and the first fight. Of course, pro debut, a lot of hype behind you making your professional debut. It seemed to me, at least from the outside looking in, that you were slightly more relaxed going into the second one than you were professional debut. Was that right?
Yeah, definitely. The first one, I thought I rushed everything. Like, I got in the ring and my amateur brain just switched on, and I was just, I'll be honest, I'll give that performance like a C. Like, it was good, I got the victory and I won every round, every second. But it wasn't me, what I wanted to do. I didn't practice, I didn't do anything that I was practicing and trying to do. But the second fight, I was slowing the pace down, I was picking my shots better, and that's what we want to do, keep moving forward from that performance, so yeah.
How quickly are you looking to move in your professional career?
So for this year, I just want to get used to being in the ring, used to fighting in a professional ring under the bright lights, in front of people, in front of the cameras, putting under that pressure. Next year, definitely I want to step it up. I want to start fighting people that have got good names and who are coming to win and who are coming to push me back and, try and take what's mine. And it's going to be exciting next year, and I want to step up and see how good I am.
So that was Caroline Dubois, Andy. Again, somebody I know that you would have watched through the amateurs, obviously had quite a lot of, I don't want to say hype because of the negative connotations that go along with that, but, boxed well in the Olympics, didn't medal unfortunately, but showed some things there. And obviously now with Shane McGuigan, very much a professional style coach and surrounded by good fighters all around the gym, both male and female, in Ellie Scotney. Same question. Caroline Dubois, what do you expect to see from her in the pro game? Of course, not the depth of talent that we see in the male code, but a good time for her to be turning over as a professional, as she alluded to at McGuigan's gym.
Yeah, definitely. I would expect to see her win a world title. As you rightly point out, the depth isn't there yet. That will change over time. And at the moment, you do what you can do, and you box whoever is put in front of you. It's the old cliche that applies equally in men's, but I thought what she achieved as a senior in the Olympics, just qualifying for the Olympics, was really impressive because she did everything as a youth. But she had a tough draw in the qualifier, in the Olympic qualifier, and she managed to get through and qualify. And then she had a pretty tough draw in the competition itself, and she very, very nearly medalled. Lost on a split decision in the quarterfinals, which could have gone either way. And that was just a great runway into the pros, because I don't really like to see fighters turn pro without any senior experience. I just think you need it. I just think you need it, particularly with the men, but also with female fighters. And she's looked great. She's got a good skill set. She's obviously got a good temperament. Comes to the ring to sweet Caroline, which works. It really does. Sky are excited about her. Everybody who sees her is excited about her, and I think rightly so. But she definitely won't get carried away with it. She's just not that kind of character. I think the makeup in the gym that they've got down there, I've not been there, but I should, because it's just around the corner from me. I think the combo of the likes of the 2 Dubois, the 2 Azims, Robbie Davis, who's got to a great level but has been around the block a bit more, Billam-Smith, who's becoming more of a kind of senior pro in that gym now, Lawrence Okoli, although he's not really been around much recently. I like it. I think it's a good Fowler as well. Interesting to see what he does next. There's a good balance, isn't there, of people at different stages of their career, different weight divisions, and I'd imagine they all mix well, because there don't seem to be any kind of problematic characters there at all.
Yeah, it's something that Shane McGuigan has always spoken about in the past. You want to have kind of your young upstarts and keeping all of the established pros on their toes when they're doing the circuits and, on the runs and things like that. Keep everybody hungry and everybody kind of pushing and motivating each other. I mean, in recent years, his stable has gone, and he's taking more and more fighters on now, himself, and of course Josh Pritchard, his number 2, his assistant. But yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right in what you say about Caroline not being the type to let things go to her head. Obviously, from a boxing family with her brothers, Daniel, Prince, of course, and the dad, very much very straight shooter, and will keep on top of them, make sure they don't get too big for their boots. I'm sure. But she spoke to me about wanting to learn her craft as a professional. I think by her own admission, she was a little bit eager and keen to impress on a professional debut, as most fighters or a lot of fighters are. But even in her second outing, she seemed like she just settled down a little bit more, and looks as though she may, maybe again, it depends on what level of her opposition is. It's another one that's going to be difficult to give her. In the women's code, you can kind of get the rounds. Knockouts not as common, but competitive rounds, I think, is where we'll see the best of her moving forwards.
Yeah, and maybe they'll look to try and do something not a bit more serious. That's not quite the right word for it. But on that Shields Marshall card, it's going to be an all-female card, isn't it? As we understand it. So you've basically got co-main events in Shields against Marshall, and then Mayer against Baumgartner, which is just as good a fight. That's a brilliant fight.
I think there'll be quite a lot of needle between both.
Oh, there will be,
fights as
well.
well.
There will be. I think Michaela Mayer and Baumgartner, I think the sparks will fly off those two in a really good way. I don't think it'll be... They're different kinds of personalities. It's interesting, whenever you have an Olympian against someone who's not an Olympian, and we saw this with a Coley against Chamberlain, you get this narrative emerges that one's kind of silver spoon.
Yeah, you had everything.
And the other one isn't. And Michaela Mayer... I don't mean this as any kind of disrespect to her, but I look at her as being quite a basic spit and sawdust kind of fighter, actually. Like, she's got that Olympic pedigree, and she has got some technical ability, but I think she just likes to have it.
She likes to fight, yeah.
That's how she likes to do it.
The Maiva Hamadouche fight was a very good fight.
Yeah, I think, exactly. And on that card, you'd imagine they're going to have to put Lauren Price, Karis Artin-School, Caroline Dubois. They're three really real big name female fighters that they've signed, Sky, who've ended up going quite heavily down the female boxing, pro boxing route for a combination of reasons. I think it's something that they wanted to do because they want to make it as accessible to people as they can, but also in the early stages of the relaunch, there are signs that this is changing now with Billam-Smith on Saturday and Liam Smith signing. They were struggling to sign kind of name
headliners,
men, basically. And so they've got a good number of high quality female fighters on their roster.
They certainly do. Right, last and by no means least, elsewhere on the card on Saturday, Hassan Azim returns to the ring. I was down at McGuigan's gym with him, and here's what he had to say.
You're still very early on in your career. I've been down here several times and kind of checked in with you as you've progressed in the early stages of your career. How do you feel you're progressing? What things in particular have you been working on and improving on in the gym?
There's a lot of stuff I've been improving on. Every single day I'm improving. This camp is like I've not changed fully, but I've become a better fighter. Using my front hand more as well. Staying focused, stay disciplined, and you're gonna see in my next fight, the changes that are happening. I won't say much now because sitting down and saying something is totally different to showing you something on the fight night. So I will show you on fight night. Hopefully the knockouts, in the fight. If I do get the knockout early, it's not about the fight. But I'm learning in the gym. I'm sparring constantly, and I'm sparring great fighters as well. So it's in the gym that I'm learning. But if I do get first-round stoppage, that's a bonus.
So Hassan Azim, kind of admittedly the lesser spoken of Azim. I think Shane McGuigan, by his own admission, says a lot of the hype and a lot of the attention is on Adam. Adam, of course, a very special talent, but don't ignore Hassan and don't underestimate Hassan. I think Shane has called him the dark horse of the gym. He can punch. And he's somebody as well who's kind of set his stall out like his brother Adam that says, I think it's slightly different for him, not as experienced as Adam, and of course kind of Adam having the fanfare and the kind of push behind him, but wants to be in real fight sooner rather than later. So interested to see Hassan Azim this weekend.
Yeah, I remember when these two were turning pro, COVID disrupted them quite a bit, and I remember they were supposed to be one of them ended up being, I think it was Adam, making his pro debut on one of the Golden Contract final undercards. But I remember checking both of them out because it looked like they might both be on the bill. And I'd heard their names and I knew a bit about them, but not lots. But at that point, there was no real talk about who was better. It wasn't kind of, people were saying, oh, Adam's a better fighter than Hassan. And I still wouldn't say that it's necessarily true that he is. But he's the one who's got more of the spotlight so far because he's boxed a number of times and he's looked great. And Sky are very excited about him, and Shane are as well, and with justification, and obviously so a boxer. But Hassan's a really good fighter. I mean, he had a great career as a junior and a youth. Personality-wise, I don't know either of them really, but personality-wise, maybe that's just more him to kind of drift along in a slipstream. It's not like Adam is some kind of show pony who loves the limelight. I don't think he is necessarily, but I think he can definitely handle it because his last fight during fight week, he did a few meet and greets. He had quite a lot going on outside of the ring, which I looked at sometimes. We
spoke about it, didn't we?
Yeah, I just thought, don't know about that. But we kind of discussed it on the night. I was there for TalkSport for his last fight, and we got Shane in afterwards, and we got Adam in too, but we got Shane in afterwards, and he was saying, listen, this guy is super focused. What we need to see is what happens when someone hits him with an 8-ounce glove. And I said, that's exactly what I was saying, that's what we need to see. And he said, the thing is, I've not seen anyone hit him with a 16-ounce glove yet. People have half hit him, but they just can't catch him. And that's a good problem to have, isn't it, if you're a trainer? But the thing is, we do need to see that. But with Hassan, yeah, I kind of like his style. Although I don't know him at all, I kind of like the way he's going about things.
Yeah, quietly confident. You've got Hassan the hitman and Adam the assassin.
Yeah.
Deadly brotherly combination there. Okay, well, we're about there. We're going to wrap things up because, we're running out of time. But before I let you go, disregarding the main event, out of all of those names that we've just gone through, which one of those prospects excites you the most and why?
I think it's Whittaker. I think it is Whittaker just because he did so much in such a short space of time on that GB squad, and he hasn't emerged from that squad with what you would describe as a traditional GB style. He's got his own style and he's always stuck to it. And I just think if with pro training he can add the power that he needs, that everybody needs, if he's got that punching power, the feet that he's got and the reflexes that he's got, and the belief that he's got in himself, there is a lot there. In terms of basic ingredients, there is a lot there, because I love it when you get fighters who their principal, their core business, if you like, is hitting and not getting hit, because that's key if you're going to have any kind of longevity as a pro. That is a great skeleton to try and flesh out, and that's absolutely how he does it. So Whittaker, I think it's going to be a really fun ride with him, whatever ends up happening.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I think if he gets it right, he can really get it right.
Yeah.
And of course, we know that there's a lot to do with professional boxing that's not even necessarily in the ring, but he's got good backing with Sky. I think he's I don't want to say played the field, but he took a lot of offers and a lot of meetings. He had a lot of interest from promoters. He's landed on Sky Sports and Boxer, which is of course a big platform by all accounts.
I think the way he went about all of that is really interesting because, I don't know what we're kind of like really allowed to say and not say, but I think Matchroom were pretty fuming with him. The way things turned out, the way
I think they felt that they had him.
Yeah,
they felt that they may have had him, and it turns out that they didn't.
That they didn't. Yeah, and right from the get-go, it would appear that he's not too worried about upsetting people in search of just doing what he feels is best for him.
Interesting quality to have as a professional career.
Yeah, definitely. Particularly when early on, when you talk to any fighter about Macklin's good on this. Matt Macklin, he turned up, talked to a few times about what it was like turning pro, because he won the ABAs when he was 18. So he didn't go to the Olympics, but that was, 20 years ago, that was a bigger deal than it is now, and particularly that young. So there was a fanfare around him and plenty of people wanted him. But he didn't really have anywhere to go for any advice, because nobody does. You're kind of left in this limbo. And he said his head was just spinning, like he didn't know what to do or where to go. And before he knew it, he'd signed with Frank, which wasn't the wrong thing to do, but his training situation, he hadn't really, just an absolute whirlwind of activity, and he would just do things a lot differently probably if he had his time again. Whereas Whittaker took his time and seemed to know exactly how he wanted to do it, which was speak to everyone and then make up his own mind. Didn't get railroaded into anything.
He certainly didn't. But yeah, very excited to see him return to the ring this weekend. And it's always a pleasure, Andy, to speak to you, but we have run out of time. So thanks very much for popping in today and chopping things up. And thanks very much to you guys, the ID Boxing audience, for checking out our Billam-Smith Chamberlain preview with a little hint of Wasserman thrown in for good measure. Thanks very much for stopping by, and we'll catch up with you soon.